Hello everyone! Hope you're having an amazing start to your February. My name is Matt Tsujimura and I have the privilege of serving as our extensions lead here at C4. And I just want to say welcome. I'm so excited to be with you guys today. And today we'll be wrapping up our series, Marked. And if you'll recall, being marked means that we've been set apart from this world because of the sacrifice of Jesus. In this series so far, we've talked about the struggles of pretending to be something or someone else, putting our position over God's presence, and really embracing God's journey for our life. But we can't live this kind of life. We can't live a marked life when we're still holding on to our old life. And that's our main point today. If you're taking notes, jot it down. We can't live a marked life when we're still holding on to our old life. You know, for me, when I think about that, two things come to mind. In college, I was a pretty big video gamer, and then I started dating someone and realized there's not as much time to play video games. But then I kept playing video games, and that relationship ended for some reason. And what I learned from that was that I guess you can't live the single person video gamer life when you jump into a relationship, because you got to give something up. But since my college days, comfort and safety drive most of the decisions in my life. Because I don't know about you all, but I really don't like stepping out of my comfort zone. Karaoke? Nope. Dancing? Negative. And to be completely transparent, giving a message fell on that list too. And when I was asked to give this message, my initial gut reaction was, nope, no way. I don't want to do it. Doing host is one thing, but teaching, that's kind of a big responsibility. Yeah, I co-lead a circle, but that's not really the same thing. But something in me just kept saying, just do it. And so I stepped into it. And here I am. And I have to be honest, it's been a crazy couple of weeks leading up to this. I didn't get much sleep, I wasn't feeling the best, and that voice of doubt just wouldn't go away. Because this is all new for me. It's scary. But I also got to spend more time with God, just really asking Him, what do you want to talk about? I spent more and more time just sitting and praying. And I'm actually really thankful for everything that God has walked me through these last couple of weeks. Because even though surrendering my own comfort was uncomfortable, I got to experience more of God in my everyday life, to the point where I really didn't want to live with anything less. That doesn't mean me doing more messages, just more God in my life. But have you ever experienced that feeling before, where you found a new or different way to do something that just blows the old way out of the water? And that new way is so much better that you can't imagine going back to the old way? It's like getting a new iPhone. Could you ever imagine going back to the Nokia brick or the Sidekick? Or how about finding a new way of cooking your favorite dish? Because that Instapot is like magic compared to the 12 hours it used to take on the stove. Or getting married and starting a family. Would you want to give that up to go back to your days of being single? Or maybe you've had an experience similar to mine, where you experienced God in a completely new way and you don't want to go back. See, the thing is, we can't have both the old and the new way. But we usually don't care, because the new way is more rewarding, it's more fulfilling, it's just better. And that is what we're talking about today, because we can't live a marked life when we're still holding on to our old life. And to help us understand this a little clearer, I want to take a look at a guy in the Bible you probably have heard of, Paul. And Paul writes about this in his letter to the Philippians in chapter 3, verses 4-6. If anyone else thinks he has reason for confidence in the flesh, I have more. Circumcised on the 8th day, of the people of Israel, of the tribe of Benjamin, a Hebrew of Hebrews. As to the law, a Pharisee. As to zeal, a persecutor of the church. As to righteousness under the law, blameless. See, from birth, Paul had everything going for him. Back in the day, circumcision on the 8th day was required by law in Leviticus 12, based on the covenant made between God and Abraham. And according to some of the believers in Philippi, you had to be circumcised to be saved. Through circumcision, Paul was physically marked as a member of Israel. And he was of Jewish heritage, belonging to the people of Israel, making him part of the nation of God's chosen people. And more specifically, the tribe of Benjamin, which gave Israel some notable people, including King Saul, the first king of Israel, and Queen Esther. And Paul was raised as a Hebrew of Hebrews, proudly embracing his Jewish heritage in a time when most Jews were ashamed of their Jewish roots. Paul had no control over these things, which is what makes them worth bragging about. Basically, what Paul is saying is that he was born to the perfect family. He was set up for life and beyond at birth. But as if that wasn't enough, he became a Pharisee, an elite group known for their knowledge and devotion to the law of God. Really, they were the lawyers of Paul's day, well-versed in God's law, the Torah. And he wasn't just a talker. He walked his devotions out by persecuting the church. Because remember, at the time, the church ran counter to everything the Pharisees believed to be true and right. Paul was so devoted to the ways of the Pharisees that he was considered blameless. Paul was basically the Michael Jordan or the Tom Brady of the Jews. He reached the highest levels of success, and he wasn't just talk, but he had the resume to prove how good he was. You might not agree with his methods, but you couldn't deny that he's one of the best. But it's important to see here that Paul didn't do these things to gain status among the Jews. He did these things because he believed that the more passionate and devoted he was to God's law, the closer he would be to God. Paul truly believed that this was what pleasing God looked like, because that's what was written in the law, and he poured himself into it. But then Paul drops this bomb, verses 7 and 8. But whatever gain I had, I counted as loss for the sake of Christ. Indeed, I count everything as loss because of the surpassing worth of knowing Christ Jesus, my Lord. Paul flipped the script and introduced the truth that knowing God and being known by him is all he needs. Paul surrendered everything he devoted himself to, and he considered it rubbish compared to having a personal relationship with Jesus. See, because Paul tried the world's way, being and doing everything the world said he was supposed to be righteous. But it didn't lead him to Jesus. The way Paul talks about this in Philippians is as if we're looking at a ledger. He has his gains column and he has his loss column. And he lists everything in his life, looking at all the things he has confidence will bring him closer to God. Circumcised, gain. Race, Israelite, gain. Tribe, Benjamin, gain. Knowledge of God's laws, well, he became a Pharisee, gain. Doer, not just the talker of the word, well, he persecuted the church, so gain. Official status under the law, blameless, another gain. All these things Paul adds to his gains column. But on the road to Damascus, Paul experienced Jesus personally for the first time. And of course, that goes on his ledger too. Knowing Jesus, gain. But when those scales fell off his eyes, Paul began to see his ledger differently. Because the more he got to know Jesus, Paul began to see that his spiritual ledger and the truth that none of these other things actually brought him closer to God. Because he realized that he couldn't live a life marked by God while he was holding on to his old life. And it's with this realization that Paul commits to surrendering his life and prioritizing his relationship with Jesus. Chapter 3, verses 8 and 9 say, "For his sake I have suffered the loss of all things, and count them as rubbish in order that I may gain Christ and be found in him, not having any righteousness of my own that comes from the law, but that which comes through faith in Christ, the righteousness from God that depends on faith." Paul tells us that having a relationship with Jesus is truly the greatest thing in his life. We have to get to a place where we count everything as a loss compared to knowing Jesus. For Paul, this meant that all of his old ways needed to be unlearned and given up in order to step into what God has in store. And while it's an easy point to agree with and understand in our minds, it's a totally different story trying to get our heart on board. Because when we look at Paul's life and his ways prior to knowing Jesus, it's kind of easy to brush it off like, well, yeah, like, of course, that's not me. I'm a good person. I'm not persecuting the church or anything like that. But let me ask you, what is on your ledger? If you were to list all the things in your life, how do they stack up to having a personal relationship with Jesus? Do they count as gain or loss? See, because our lists are probably filled with things that we would all consider good things. I'm all about my family. They're my number ones. Nothing gets in the way between me and my family. Gain. I'm a single mom with 2 jobs, and I've never missed my kids' soccer games. Gain. I studied as hard as I could in school, and I'm the first in my family to go to college. Gain. Ever since I retired, I've spent more time taking care of my grandkids. Gain. Hey, I treat everyone with respect and make everyone around me feel safe and comfortable to be themselves. Gain. All these things are good things. There's tons of places in the Bible where we're told that taking care of family, working hard, and serving at church are good things. But that's what makes it so easy to settle for these things as the only things we need. But when these things take priority in our lives, we end up trying to squeeze God into whatever time we have left. This is why we can't live a marked life when we're still holding on to our old life. And trust me, I get it. I'll be the first one to tell you that my ledger is full of things that I would have considered gain. I graduated from Punahou, gain. I became an attorney, gain. Bought an apartment, moved out of my parents' place, gain. And I serve wherever and however I can, gain. Okay, maybe some of you would consider going to Punahou and being a lawyer is lost, but come on, serving at church is a shoo-in for the gains column, right? Because when I first came to C4, I was completely content with coming in on Saturday afternoons, listening to service, hanging out with my friends, and then going home and going about the rest of my weekend. But as usually happens, God had other plans. Because when COVID hit and I had a close run-in myself that led to my own self-quarantine, I was ready to stay locked down and stay inside. Only thing was, I volunteered to help lead the delivery team for C4's food bank ministry. But that's a good, God-centered ministry team, and I'm helping to deliver food to people who maybe can't afford to get it themselves, right? Gain. Over time, as the church pivoted and adjusted to the twists and turns of COVID, I somehow found myself going from delivery team lead to food bank ministry co-lead to extension lead, all in the span of about 4 months. But hey, those are all good church ministries, right? Double gain. Now, I'd been down this road of being quickly elevated before, letting it get to my head and then crashing and burning. So I reminded myself, stay humble. Remember, this isn't about you. This is about being the church and meeting the needs of others. And that was a new way for me. Leading out of humility, that's another gain. Then, one day, Pastor Kian reminded me that I hadn't been to Fresh Fire in a while. And I thought, Fresh Fire? That's at 7 a.m. And I ain't waking up that early, not when COVID cleared my schedule of almost all my responsibilities. I got tons of time to go do a whole lot of other stuff. But okay, because I know we're called to gather together, to pray, to worship, and Fresh Fire has all that, so I'll go. Plus, I'm totally sacrificing more of my time to Jesus. That's gains on gains on gains, plus, 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 plus. Man, I'm really building God's kingdom. This is awesome. But sitting in Fresh Fire, listening to the worship team go, and hearing the passion in people's voices that went up to the prayer mic, I'm not gonna lie, I was ready to walk out because this was a little intense for me. These people are on a whole different level, and I don't really need that. I'm good with everything I got going on right here. But as I sat there, reading my Bible and listening to live worship, God showed me just how far from Him I was. Here I was, operating in my spiritual gift of helps and services, trying to help build the kingdom, and I did it all without an ounce of Jesus. I did it so well that I didn't even notice I went right back to my old life of living in performance without even realizing it. I go back to performance because I used to rely solely on the validation and affirmation of others to form my identity. I lived my life marked by other people, but the truth that I needed to know and that God wants you to know today is that you are marked by God. Embrace God's journey for your life and surrender your old life. Forget what lies behind and strain forward to what lies ahead, because we cannot live a marked life by God when we're still holding on to our old life. When we hold on to our old life, we miss out on the greatest relationship we could ever have. But surrendering our old life will look different to you and me. See, that's the beauty of having a personal relationship with Jesus. It's unique. And I don't know what surrendering looks like in your life. We're all in different places in our relationship with Jesus. But wherever you are on your walk, I want to challenge you this week to spend time just being with Jesus. If this is your first time hearing about Jesus and this whole church thing, maybe a friend invited you or you ventured down the rabbit holes of YouTube, I want to challenge you to go back and listen to our Mark series from the very beginning. If you have any questions, you can send them to chad@c4.church for our Q&A next week. Because I know getting started can be the hardest part. So I just want to challenge you to take some time to sit and to listen. And hey, if you've been walking with Jesus for a bit and you realize today that maybe you and Jesus are a little bit more like acquaintances, or that your relationship with him is more like being a follower of his on Instagram, this week I want to ask that you would spend an hour getting personal with Jesus. Where and how will look different for all of us. So I want you to think of the last time you really were able to connect with him and start there. Maybe for you, it could be listening or singing worship. Maybe it's out in nature or just sitting in your room in prayer. For me, it happens when I go diving, where I've got nothing but time to talk with him. Wherever you've connected with God before is a good place to start. Sit with him and share anything and everything that is on your heart, and then wait for his response. I don't know what it's going to look like, sound like, or feel like, but I know our God, and I know he'll make his presence known to you. And for those of you who've got a solid personal relationship with Jesus, I want to challenge you to come together with others. I want to challenge you to join together because there's a power in standing together with other people boldly proclaiming your faith in Jesus. It is unlike anything you could ever experience by yourself. Jump into a circle if you aren't already. Come join us at Fresh Fire or sign up for Level Up on Saturdays. See, because this journey of surrendering our old life isn't easy. There will be days when the struggle and disappointment just pile on, when we lose our jobs, a relationship comes to an end, a loved one passes away, and we can't help but sit there and think, God, I don't want to do this anymore. This is the moment where we start feeling that urge to go back to our old ways, and we start to think, I don't want to walk down this path with you anymore. I keep praying, I keep walking, but it doesn't feel like you're there. Can you even hear me? If that's you today, God needs you to know he sees you. You have not been forgotten. Don't be afraid, for I am with you. Don't be discouraged, for I am your God. I will strengthen you and help you. I will hold you up with my victorious right hand. See, because we have been marked. And although the world might tell us to deal with our anxiety, depression, or fear by turning to medications or addictions, we have a God who is here for us. Letting go of our old life, the only life we've known, is not normal. It is not natural, and it definitely is not comfortable. But we're stepping into a personal relationship with a God who loves us so much that he sent his son to die, that we could draw closer to him. So let us focus our sights not on what we're letting go, but what we're stepping into. Because as we draw near to God, he will draw near to us. And as we continue to surrender our life to find Jesus and truly embrace our lives as marked, we'll begin to stand out. When the chaos and the busyness of life try to steal our joy and our hope, we'll feel the freedom and the peace that comes with knowing that Jesus is there with us. And the people in our lives, they'll start to notice. They'll begin to wonder, how can you be so hopeful all the time? And they'll start asking us about it. And in that moment, God will leave his mark on one more person. Because God doesn't just desire to mark your life, he desires to mark the lives of the people around you.